Barnaby Brocket, Chapter 12. A Star is Born. Barnaby stopped thinking about how to get home to Sydney and started thinking about how to thank Joshua Pruitt. Very few people, he decided, would have been thoughtful enough to disinfect his bruise and make sure that he wouldn't float away. But what could he do, he wondered. He had very little money and no friends in the city. Then he had an idea. Walking slowly down the street, very slowly, he went in search of a post office. And when he found one, he stepped inside and sat down on a stool in front of a large telephone directory, turning the pages quickly as he searched for the address. It didn't take him long to find what he was looking for. He scribbled the details down on a piece of paper, and, because most of the streets in Manhattan are numbered instead of named, he made his way there with very little difficulty, despite the iron weights in his shoes and the fact that his ears were starting to hurt again. From the street outside, the art gallery looked very imposing. It was painted completely white, and through the large windows Barnaby could see only a few small paintings hanging on the walls. He had never been inside such a place before, and felt a little anxious, but he took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped inside. A woman seated behind a desk looked up when she caught sight of him. The expression on her face suggested to Barnaby that she might be about to pass out in horror. "Revolting," she said in a surprisingly masculine voice. "What is?" asked Barnaby. "Your clothes. No feeling for colour, no awareness of what's in and what's out. I mean, checked shorts at this time of year," she added, looking at Barnaby's outfit and shaking her head in disdain. "Where are we anyway? A golf course?" She stood up, and he was amazed to see how tall she was. Almost 7 feet in height, with hair pulled back from her forehead so tightly that her eyebrows were raised up almost as high as her hairline. Her skin was deathly pale, and her lips painted the most terrifying shade of blood red. "And who might you be?" she asked, dragging out every word as if their enunciation was painful to her. "A Barnaby Brocket," said Barnaby. "Well, this is not a creche, Barnaby Blewett," she declared, her tone suggesting that it would be beneath her dignity to get the boy's name right. "Nor is it an orphanage. This is an art gallery. Get out immediately and take your particular smell with you." Barnaby gave himself a little sniff, just like Captain W.E. Johns always did when he curled up in a ball in his basket, and realised that she might have a point there. He hadn't had a wash since leaving Ethel and Marjorie's coffee farm, and had slept on a train from Brazil to New York in the meantime. "That's not a peculiar smell," said Barnaby, trying his hardest to sound offended. "It's my aftershave." "You're too young to shave. You're just a little boy." Barnaby frowned. She was right. It was best to simply come to the matter in hand. "I've come to see Mr. Vincente," he said. "Mr. Vincente?" asked the woman, laughing at the absurdity of his remark. "Firstly, no one refers to him as Mr. Vincente. He is simply Vincente. And secondly, I'm afraid that Vincente is extremely busy. His calendar is tied up from now until the end of the decade, and regardless of this, he does not associate with smelly little boys who wander in off the streets with band-aids on their foreheads." "Please tell him that Barnaby Brocket is here," said Barnaby, ignoring her rudeness. "I'm sure he will want to see me." "No. Now get out." "Tell him that it's a matter of some urgency. If you don't leave," declared the woman, stepping forward now and towering over him, "I will be forced to call the police. Tell him that I have arrived from a certain coffee farm in Brazil. I think he'll want to see me then. Don't you?" The woman hesitated. She knew enough of her employer's history to realise that the words coffee farm and Brazil played an important part in it. She had read the biographies that had been written about him, after all, and all the newspaper interviews he had ever given. Perhaps this boy was somebody, she thought. Perhaps it might not be a good idea to antagonise him any further. "Wait here a moment," she said, allowing an exhausted sigh to escape her mouth as she turned around and disappeared into an office at the back of the gallery. A minute or two later, a dark-haired man with a pencil-thin moustache appeared, looking at Barnaby with a half-smile on his face, an expression of some curiosity. "You wanted to see me?" he asked, his accent betraying his roots in the favelas of Sao Paulo. "I'm Barnaby Brocket. explained Barnaby. "I was floating in the skies over Sydney when I bumped into a hot air balloon, manned by your friends Ethel and Marjorie. It's a long story, but they took me to stay with them on their coffee farm for a week. I even slept in your old room. They speak very highly of you. Palmyra told me that you were their favourite person ever." "But they were my greatest friends," exclaimed Vincente, clapping his hands together in delight. "My benefactors. Everything I have I owe to them." "And they saved you too, yes? Like they saved me?" "Well, sort of, I suppose," admitted Barnaby. "I certainly don't know what would have become of me if I hadn't run into them when I did." He looked over at the tall woman, who was glaring at him with a mixture of hostility and contempt. "Is this your wife?" he asked Vincente in an innocent voice. At this question, her eyes opened so wide that Barnaby was afraid they might fall out and bounce across the floor. "I am no man's wife," she insisted haughtily, as if she had just been accused of spending her evenings playing computer games. "No," muttered